of the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medford School Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the City of Medford website at www.medfordma.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen or watch the meeting may do so by accessing the meeting link contained herein. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the City of Medford or Medford Community Media websites an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. The meeting can be viewed through Medford Community Media on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 43 at 4:30 p.m. Since the meeting will be held remotely, participants can log or call in by using the following link or call-in number: 1-929-205-6099. Please enter meeting ID 914-7691-9075 when prompted. Additionally, questions or comments can be submitted during the meeting by emailing medfordsc@medford.k12.ma.us. Those submitting must include the following information: your first and last name, your Medford street address, your question or comment. The agenda will be as follows: discussion on how to redesign and relaunch the Medford High School Vision Committee, signed by Dr. Maurice Edouard Vincent, Superintendent of Schools. And we'll be screen sharing a presentation.
Should I take the roll, Mayor?
Roll call, yes.
Member Jenny Graham? Jenny?
Here.
Kathy Kretz?
Here.
Melanie McLaughlin?
Present.
Mia Mastone?
Here.
Paul Rousseau?
Present.
Paulette Vanderkloot present. Mayor Lungo Kern?
Present, 7 present, 0 absent.
So good evening, Madam Mayor. The presentation that was shared with the committee earlier this evening, I was going to have Mr. Fallon, Mr. DeLeva, as they are the two closest to it, walk us through it for the committee. Mr. Fallon is just coming in right now, so we'll get him up. And just give me 1 second to adjust one other thing.
Great, thank you.
And screen share for you, Mr. Fallon and Mr. DeLeva.
Good evening.
Hello, everyone. I think Chad and I will piggyback back and forth on this presentation. Just before we get started, I know there's going to be discussions regarding, the relaunching of the Vision Committee. There's been some things in the past that have been sort of set up, and I guess some of the things we were talking about, are we talking about like renovations to the building, or are we talking more vision stuff? But I think we're going to show you what we've currently done so far, so that when you are making that decision of where you're going or which direction you're going, regarding what has been done recently at the high school, which many of you are already aware of, as well as at the vocational school. So we can go to the next slide. So, some of the projects that you are aware of, obviously, the swimming pool had been redone a few years ago. We just recently got the new gymnasium floor my first year here. The science labs were completed in 2014. Now with the COVID CARES Act money, things that have been improvement is our HVAC system. We are still working on the student bathrooms that are in progress, and the new boilers that were funded by the MSBA grant. So as you can see here, little just pictures of our swimming pool, as well as our floor that's partnered with Lesley University. I know many of you have been there already, so that's one thing that we are quite proud of that has been improved throughout the years. Move on. Now, you got to be impressed with this. I was actually on the roof to get these pictures, so But I wanted to make sure that it was clear that the swap outs were just recently happening with our Go Green contractor that has been doing improvements for fans as well as air conditioning and air exchanges. So I wanted to make sure you got a picture of some of the units that have been already installed on the newer end. If you look more to that left picture, you'll also see that the venting and the piping have been improved as well. Next one. Many of you are aware of our science lab areas. Each science lab has a prep room area as well as a regular science lab area, which, you know, again, through MSBA grant funding that happened around 2014. And then, of course, we have our biotech area that's part of the science lab as well, that many of you have visited us through the years. Okay. And Chad's going to take over on the vocational side. I know you've seen some of this presentation before, but he's got more updated pieces to what he's been doing on the vocational side.
Thanks, Paul. So I definitely am thrilled that I can beef up my resume. Not that I'm going anywhere, but who knew 4 years ago when I took this job, I'd have be in my fourth or fifth project here in the high school. So it's really cool. I'm glad to be able to do it. We have done a lot. Every time we take on a project, though, I have to tell you, and I always make the joke with usually whoever's in my 6 foot radius. Every time I do these projects, I worry. I like see this wrecking ball in my mind, thinking, with my luck, I'll finish the new salon. You know, the marble was just put in, and we'll get funding for a new school, and in comes the wrecking ball, and I'll be standing there guarding the marble that I took from the girls' locker room. So it's always a risk. Luckily, all the work we do, we have been lucky. We have private donors. It's grant funded. A lot of the stuff we can take with us, but there are some things that obviously we're doing to the physical plant that can't be taken with us if we were to leave this building. But with that said, and getting to know the building more over 4 years and kind of seeing the structure when it's exposed, there are a lot of good, I do think it has good bones. I think the HVAC systems were something that we're going to need to be done regardless. Whether the building can last us another 50 years, I don't know. But the projects we're doing now are at least revitalizing the space, making it safe, making it up to code, and hopefully it will buy us some time. So a quick update. I did give this at the Buildings and Grounds Subcommittee, so I won't get into detail. But metal fabrication and welding was painted, walls and ceilings. That was a no-cost job. We have finished, at least for now, our LED lighting projects. We were able to do 5 different programs. That was $100,000 plus in grant funding. That's also a cost savings to the school. So we have 5 of our programs with that. Paul, you can go to the next slide.
I'm not in control of it.
Oh, sorry, Paul. Robotics and engineering is fully complete at this point. We have a very small punch list. We have to do a few items before that's finished, but that space is very much inhabitable. That was through the Skills Capital Grant, $287,000. The final thing for the HVAC down there right now is to get the unit going in the classroom. We have new heat, and that also has windows and doors that open. Next, just some more pictures of robotics, the finished product. In programming and web development, we moved that program to a bigger space, which was the former robotics and engineering program. Spent about $16,000 on that. Those are all items that could be moved if needed. That was through a partnership with the Furniture Trust. So 25 new workstations, new carpet, paint, and new computers that we bought through Perkins funding last year. In the former programming and web room, we made that a construction technology lab that will be shared by metal fabrication, construction and craft laborers, and carpentry. The desks were built by the students. We used wood that was just made out of pine. It wasn't anything expensive. And you can see that the teachers made a demonstration desk as well. We did this prior to COVID, but it actually lent itself well to our current situation because students aren't directly next to each other. Next slide, please. So the cosmetology salon is just about finished. These are some pictures of the process over the last year, really. If you go to the next slide, I can show you where we're at now. The floor will be finished by this week. The marble from the girls' locker room has been retrofitted for this space. If you flip to the next slide, we can show you the current pictures.
Dr. Cushing.
Dr. Cushing. Thanks.
So much like we did in the bistro, we took more remnants of the marble that was in the locker room, and we did basically a 25-foot countertop, if you will, in the middle of the salon, and that's going to be 12 workstations for the students. We use the marble above the sink on that lower picture, and the picture in the middle is a picture of the floor, and then the picture on the right is one of our instructors with students just last week putting the fascia trim on the workstations. Automotive technology, this was really, the stars aligned on this one. This was a combination of the students not being in the space allowed us to empty everything. I shouldn't say we allowed the teachers to empty everything out of the shop, which was a huge project. This shop hadn't been touched in years, and we put down a high-grade airport quality floor down in that space. That would have been no doubt a $100,000 job that we were able to get as no cost because of our partnership with the Painters Union. Sherwin-Williams donated the paint. So really when all was said and done, the only thing I paid for was to have the ceiling painted by a contractor after the fact, because I didn't dare ask the Painters Union back. They were moving on to another project with the apprentices. So we did that ourselves. That was about $10,000. So all I had to spend for this project was about $10,000 for the painting of the ceiling. If you go to the next slide, you can see. So with the new lighting, the ceiling and the floor, the new lifts, Automotive technology is now one of our newest programs. And last year with Perkins funding, we upgraded some machinery and products for the shop. So now we're up to NATEF standards in this program as well. Next. And that's an update from our side.
Great. Member McLaughlin?
I just wanted to say it looks great, Chad. Thank you very much. I got a little bit of a tour before COVID, and I was just so impressed. It had been my first time for a walk around. So it just looks so good, and it's exciting, and I can't wait to see the salon all done. And I'm sure your students can't wait to get in there.
Yeah, it's going to be nice. Thank you for your support.
Dr. Cushing, is that do you have another slide deck or?
That is the slide deck we have right now. We have begun work on another slide deck to really look at how we would go about really setting a vision, the type of work that should be done to go through, kind of like Mr. DeLeva was saying at the start, really establishing like the vision for what we want Medford High School to be, so that the physical structure then meets those needs. But I see Mr. Russo has his hand up.
Russo?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I have to admit confusion. It seemed that I wasn't on the agenda, so I was a little confused by that. But that all seems like really important information for the Vision Committee to consider when they do their work. And I'm glad that we have actually put it all together in a list. I think that that'll be helpful for them. Just wondering, so are we moving on to the policy to fill out the required 6 items that we have to hand off to the Vision Committee?
So can I ask a question? Is that okay? Because the inception of the Vision Committee is where I've gone through my previous emails, and it really started under a different administration regarding building improvements. And Mia, I know you're quoted actually in the press release as well as the application process for that. And I think what I'm trying to get a grasp on is, it sounds like we're reforming the Vision Committee, but we haven't set the actual standards for what that Vision Committee is, because there was a selection that was made, and then it was decided that we would reopen the application process, which totally is understandable. I think that's where the crux of where I am stuck as the principal of where this is going. So I'm glad we're having this committee of the whole, because I'm a little.
And Paul, you're right. I think it was, well, now looking back, it was an oversight because it was kind of Kathy and I transitioning, and Kathy was really the one who was who thought of a Vision Committee, and that's when she came on as chair of the Buildings Committee. So really, Kathy, I don't know if you probably remember better than I do, because it was the vocational teacher who had come up and has presented when the Buildings Committee, I think it was the last meeting we transitioned together.
Yeah, it was Mr. Brown. It was actually his idea, and he proposed and shared some ideas. He reached out to me this week to see if I had a copy of his proposal, which I don't have it, but it was all great information. And he actually has, it looks like he has 35 years in the construction industry, 7 years at Medford Vocational Technical High School. He also has 8 years in manufacturing and design. So, he actually came up with the idea and shared some like a brief presentation at that building and grounds meeting. And I have a copy of the minutes, but it doesn't have a copy of the proposal. Like, I actually pulled out the minutes, I saved them, but I don't have a copy of his proposal. But I think it was more along, what were we going to go, were we going to do renovations, or was it going to be a new school? But I think, like, with everything going on right now, all the updates that are going on, including the HVAC and the boiler and all the vocational updates, I think it might be best to go forward with this committee, for a renovation for the high school, almost like a refurbish the high school. And I think also the trouble that we had earlier was that, we didn't have a diverse group. So that's why it was disbanded. And we need to just, I guess, the mayor and the committee, we just need to, I think, come up with an application process and maybe a lottery process to choose the very select, diverse group. And that's what I remember so far.
Thank you, Member Kratz. Member Graham.
So I think when we disbanded this committee, we talked about the fact that, one of the, among the challenges in the way that the committee was formed is that we did not have a diverse cross-section of residents participating, but that was because we weren't following our own rules about how to establish such a committee. And I think we need to go back to the beginning of that process and say, which is what we agreed we would do, is say, what is the scope of this committee that we're asking? And therefore, how many people do we need? And what is the time frame? And what do we expect from them? And what parameters are we providing to them so that they can then go off and do their exploratory work, whatever that work might be. But it would be hugely irresponsible of this committee to say, just because we have done stuff in recent times, that we shouldn't at least examine what all of our options are, because when you are retrofitting a building, it is often far more expensive than something new. Sometimes it's not, but none of us is qualified to make that decision, So we should, I think we need to proceed with the plans that we had in place to sort of examine those as options. So what Mr. Brown presented to us back at that meeting, because I was in attendance, was that there's really 3 options. One is to renovate in place and to do that a little bit at a time. That's one option. The other was to build something new on site. So basically stand up a new structure and then ultimately the current one goes away. The third option was not to build on site at all, but to find some other site or location and explore what that would look like. And I think each of those three things at this point in time, based on what we don't know, are just as viable as the last thing. So I think, in terms of the scope of the committee, we need to not limit them, and we need to, as a committee, not limit our thinking about how we're going to do this. And I hear that all the time when the discussion of vision committee comes up, is people say, well, we did this work 6 years ago, so we can't possibly consider doing something different. I think that's an expensive assumption, potentially. And I don't feel like we are rolling in dough as a community. So we owe it to the community to make really astute, smart decisions about what's in the best interest of our vision, which we don't have at the moment, and how we get there. So I do think if we go back to the beginning of forming an advisory committee and talk about the scope, that will lead us
to questions like just how big should the committee be? Who should be on the committee? What kind of skills do we need? And then we can get to the point of how do we have an application process that allows us to ensure that we have a representative group of people on the various components of the committee to do the work that we have asked them to do. But without a framing of the work and an expectation of what we need from people, I think it's really hard to expect people to just blindly sign up for something where we can't say, it's this many hours, it's this many months, it's this much time. And I think there's a lot of facets to this process that perhaps the committee needs to be quite large because there need to be subcommittees. And I think that's what we should be talking about today, not about whether or not we are going to do X or Y or Z, because none of us is qualified to make those decisions.
Member McLaughlin?
Thank you. Also, I just, this was sort of a tricky thing in that it was a crossover between two administrations, right? And also two new school committee members and new central administration and a whole bunch of things. And so I think really sort of getting an understanding, again, to Member Graham's point and also Member Kretz's point, getting an understanding both of what the intention was under the former administration and the former school committee when this was established initially to, again, what the intent is today, what that looks like, what our policy suggests we do when we're making this sort of an ad hoc committee. And again, to Member Graham's point, what the individuals who should be, what the selection process is and what we're looking for in terms of expertise. Because I also don't feel like necessarily a vision committee, I think a vision committee will be able to do, it sounds like what we're asking them to do is, research walkthroughs, cost analysis potentially. I mean, I don't really know because we haven't spelled that out. But even among those people, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have experts per se, unless that's what we're saying, is we're looking for community-based experts. And if that's what we're saying, as opposed to community members who are submitting applications, then I think we need some clarification on that too. But I just want to make sure that those who are watching or those who watch later, community members, what have you, understand that this is something that has crossed two administrations and several school committee members. So we're all playing a little bit of catch up here. Thank you.
Member Rousseau, and then I know the admin did work on a slide deck that isn't fully ready, but maybe we can, I think that would go to intention and scope. Member Rousseau?
Thank you. I was there, and my memory is that it was, let's do a vision committee, and that was as far as we really got on what we meant. I think this committee can decide what we mean, and what was meant then is sort of not relevant. It certainly would be good if there was a clear statement. I'd be all for like, let's dig it out. But my memory was there wasn't a clear statement. And so now it's time for us to do it. And twice in the last, earlier today, as well as in February, I sent a clear statement of what I thought as a sort of a starting point for what that item B, which is the assignment the school committee wishes the committee to fulfill and the extent and limitations of its responsibilities, which is in our policy. This is essentially the scope and charter. What is it we want them to do? And, I just drafted something since I felt it was important that we could have something to respond to. If there are other ideas, that's fine too. But, mine is pretty short. It says that the Medford High School Vision Advisory Committee shall work to understand and state clearly the possible options for providing Medford with a high school that can suit our educational and other needs for the next 50 years. The options may only include those that will be carbon neutral or better. The advisory committee shall provide quarterly reports to the school committee with a presentation at the conclusion of service. So, other than the part about carbon neutrality and the setting of what's the window of time we're talking about here? 50 years from now, I'm guessing building technology will be so remarkably different than today that it seemed like a good time frame, 50 years, that we've gotten 50 years out of this high school. So, that was just something that I put together, and it was purposefully only really 2 points that are important to me, is that we are not thinking in 5 and 10 year increments, that we're thinking 50 years, and that we're not building something that will continue to destroy the earth, as we just built a police station way up on the air. Why? Because it's going to be flooding by the time this high school, if it was for 50 years, by the time this high school finishes its service. So I get a little nervous about going any more specific, because as Member Graham said, I don't have any of the technical skills to know whether or not renovating and all that other stuff are necessary. But I also feel very strongly that we shouldn't be deciding ahead of time based on what we think the financial situation of the city will be in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, when, if there was a new high school, for instance, construction doesn't start a year from now. I mean, we could be the richest community in the state. We couldn't begin from now and have a groundbreaking a year from now. So I think the financial part should be, here's what it would look like cost-wise, and then we get those back and we in the community look at them and decide, okay, well, I mean, we can or can't afford this, or we're, you know, what option do we want? But I don't know what those options would look like. So that's, for me, is where I feel like we need to start.
I wanted to share, good evening, committee members. I did want to share that I did have the opportunity to work with both Principal DeLaver and Principal Fallon. And as we were thinking and preparing for today's committee of the whole, we were kind of envisioning a structure. It's a separate slide deck, but I would love the opportunity to be able to just share some of the thinking based on what different members have said this evening about how we need to think more broadly, but also to say, like, these are some of the other possibilities that we've been thinking about. The first slide deck that was presented was kind of, you know, in the absence of us not being able to, you know, meet in large groups and go on tours, it would really be wonderful for everyone to see the work that's happening, especially in Cosmo, where it's like happening right now. And it's just exciting to see the floors and everything feels new, and you feel like it's HGTV and they should be videotaping everything that's happening. But I would love to be able to share this second deck with you, which was our thinking about the vision, you know, the vision planning. Dr. Cushing was involved as well, but this is more of a structured way. But for those of you who like to kind of see it as a structure, this is a little more formal, but this is just a proposal. So it's in draft form, but this was kind of our best thinking as a team. And thank you, Dr. Cushing, for starting the slide. And I know since we're in this format, similar to what was said, in October of 19, I was new, just coming on board. At that time, you know, Mr. DeLaver spoke to this, that we announced an official process for, you know, this master vision plan, and how do we see Medford Public Schools evolving and changing. And at that point in time, we also looked at our vocational programming, which is definitely playing an integral role in visioning. And as you could see, with all the programs that are being updated and enhanced, and, you know, these are additional opportunities for our students, I truly, truly feel like there is such untapped potential on the vocational side of the house. And you can proceed to the next slide, Dr. Cushing. There's such potential, and we are talking about how can we maximize the potential of the vocational side of the house for the entire comprehensive school community, and start thinking outside of the box, start thinking innovatively, and saying, how could Medford High School, our flagship building, re-envision itself? And so I'm going to let Mr. Fallon, I'm going to let you jump in on the mission statement. Because we're in this mode, it's hard to see where people are at, but I'm gonna let you guys start, and then I will support you, because we all worked on this together. Mr. Fallon or Mr. DeLaver, either or.
Well, so the mission statement, so I think one thing that we should note is there's been work within the building regarding NEASC, regarding our own, is when I first became principal here at the high school, that was one of the functions that we were doing. And pre-COVID, we were sort of halfway there. We were trying to get a vision statement of what a student that comes into Medford High School in 9th grade and what they should end up with out in 12th grade. And that would have been our mantra, our whole way of education through here at the high school. And that also includes structural pieces within the building. I taught here prior to the science labs. I find it very intriguing how they have turned out. I think maybe I might have stayed in teaching more instead of going to information administration, knowing that those resources were going to be part of the learning process. I mean, that's a little bit of a joke, but I mean, I'm happy where I am. I just wanted to say that it is a good thing that when structure reflects the educational value, it's very important. So this mission statement has been changed through NEASC from the prior administration being here at the high school. When NEASC comes around again, we'll be looking to rework it as well. But I think, through the years, it's important that a mission statement basically is at the top of your head. So I always still go back to the Andrews one, because I remember it, excellence through responsibility and respect. I think everybody knew that mantra going through. And then again, new administration comes in, and if they feel there's a different avenue for that, that happens. So
Paul, can I jump in?
Yep, go right ahead.
Thank you. So Member Rousseau, thank you for also kind of framing the idea of what the Vision Committee is, because I think when we've been talking about this for a while, but as kind of the team was discussing what this meant, we were trying to decide, so as an educator, when you hear vision, you think one thing, and that's usually how are teachers engaging with each other? How are students responding to each other? What's the conversation you hear in the hallways when you walk through between classes? And Paul and I were able to think about what does our high school look like 5 years from now? What did it look like 10 years ago? What does it look like now? And what are the things we want to change? And so we were trying to distinguish. So that's why it was helpful, Member Rousseau, when you kind of spoke to the fact that this vision committee was really formed from more the physical structure, perhaps. Am I right to assume that the vision committee was really tasked with the building itself?
It was a direct response to countless complaints about bathrooms that don't function. I mean, we didn't even get into the fact that barely anything of that building is ADA compliant. I mean, I had, my son is just there this year, so obviously he isn't really there, but there's not many people in the community that don't think that the physical structure is in need of a lot. It was not in response to the education that's provided in any way, shape, or form, is my memory.
So when Paul and I were thinking about what a high school of the future looks like, we started at the very bottom, which was mission and vision. And, a lot of the exercises last year that we had teachers being part of was really creating a shared vision. And that takes time, unfortunately, it really does. But we're at the point now where we felt like, however this team is made up, whoever the stakeholders end up being, Paul and I would be, have active roles, because this is the school that we're going to be at. This is the school that we want to see bring into the future. So starting at this, we thought as a team with Maurice and Peter, what is it that we can provide the committee so that they know, here are the things that have already been done over the last 10 years in the physical building, so that we can at least prioritize what needs to be done, either if we renovate or if we, come in with a wrecking ball. If you go to the next slide, what we did was we tried to put things into kind of 7 categories, that if we are able to sit at the table with the stakeholders, we can say, we're going to, first of all, provide you information. So committee members on this committee will see what are the things that have been done. Where do we really need to put our work? Where do we need to start? Is it bathrooms? Is it roof? Is it plumbing? If we provide the committee with all the information, which would include the enrollment of our school, Medford High had 4,000 students years ago, and now there's 1,300, so it's a lot different. So when we think of a new building, we're not designing a school for 4,000 students anymore. So what we did was we hoped that providing some process for this would help people on the committee really understand and really do the difficult work of deciding what a school might look like. I don't know if Maurice, if you want to jump in, or
Mayor, may I have a point of privilege?
Member McLaughlin?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fallon. I guess I want to say from, as a community member and people that I've been talking with in the community regarding the vision committee, I think, the physical structure is one aspect of the vision committee. I don't think it's the sole aspect from my perspective, which is a large reason why we were talking about making sure also that the vision committee was a diverse representation. I think we need to hear from the vision committee about what it is they see from all aspects of the vision of the high school and what needs to happen for the future of the high school, not just the physical structure, frankly. I think it is a combination of, a variety of things. For example, I think the anti-racism task force, some of the curriculum things that we've been talking about. I mean, I think that there's a whole ball of wax that we're talking, the social, emotional, and the physical, and potentially the academic. And I think that this, breaking down of it is great, but I wouldn't limit it to just the physical structure.
So luckily we didn't then. So I'm glad you said that, Melanie, because that's why I was thanking Member Rousseau for kind of clarifying it to me and maybe to other members. But what we did is we were thinking more at general that yes, this would be, we know that the intent was heavy on building, the plant itself, but there's other things that go into that when we think about what a building would look like in 5 years, there's a lot of layers. So we actually did that.
Yeah, and I also, just to piggyback, there's so many stakeholders that are involved in regarding this, not just the vision committee. It's you as the school committee, it's our site council here at the high school. There's a lot of pieces that are involved here. So what I'm trying to hope to get out of this committee of the whole too is a structured plan or a structured function for that vision committee. Or as a more of an advisory piece? Are they doing fact finding for us? And then we're taking it back to our site council and then we're reviewing it. I mean, like I said, there's so many different groups and stakeholders. I just want to make sure that it's clear of what the challenges and what the outcomes will be regarding this committee.
Mayor.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Rousseau has a question.
Yep, I didn't see him. Member Rousseau.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going through the approved policy on this, advisory committees to the school committee. So, I mean, I just want to be clear. I have no intention or interest in providing what the vision is. That was sort of the point, is the community will decide what the vision is. If the community comes together and says, knock it all down and put a bunch of trailers in, that's what Medford really wants, which I can't imagine, but let's pretend. Then that's what the community wants. I'm on for 2-year terms, just like everybody else here. This vision needs to be something that the community has agreed to. Certainly the spark was about physical plant. And I completely agree with Member McLaughlin and Paul and Chad and everybody else who's spoken that's, the physical plant is, a building is a lot more than the physical structure and how it integrates into the community and what do we include and what do we not include. MSBA, you can't build a pool with MSBA. So, those are really hard questions that we have to answer. We can't build a building that is bigger than MSBA will allow us. MSBA is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They fund school buildings. We can't actually build a building as big as that one that we have now. So we would have really important and hard conversations around the Medford Family Network and preschool and all these other things that are in our physical plant now that absolutely there's no way that the new building could be funded through the normal structures and include those. So those are really important things, but I think the community should decide that. I mean, the school committee, obviously we have a role here, but I don't have any interest in providing my vision because my vision is pretty much straightforward and simple. Knock the whole thing down, pretend there's a limitless amount of money, call Mr. Bloomberg and he'll just write us a couple $1 billion check and we'll be all happy. Unfortunately, that's not reality, but that's why I think that first of all, it does need to have a lot of people on it, and I don't know how many. I want to also be clear that I firmly and very strongly believe it cannot be majority employees of the city or of the school system. It must be majority, not us. because this is not the principal or the head, the principal's vision. This is not the school committee's vision. This needs to be the city of Medford's vision. Because if we end up with a vision where the only thing they come back and say is, we've got 3 options, they all involve knocking the building down and doing an override or whatever that thing is called when you get a loan like that, they're the ones who are going to have to sell it to the community. I mean, they have to vote for it. You know, we're 7 votes or however many of us live in Medford. We can't accomplish that. So the community needs to be 100% behind whatever the heck that vision is, because they're going to have to pay for it. Actually, no matter what the options are, they're going to have to pay for it. So
Madam Mayor, I was wondering if we'd be able to continue with the slide deck just so that we can really show those pieces that we're talking about that I think would help frame the work.
And I just want to say, I agree that it has to be a shared vision. We were just thinking, we're going to have to do a lot of we want to provide this committee with all the information they need so that they can make these decisions, so that they can begin to have these conversations, because a lot of people don't know about the things that we've been doing within the building, because as far as we know, we're stuck with this building.
point of information.
So, yep.
Point of
Information member, so then Mr. DeLeva.
Thank you. You know, part of the policy, I just wanted to provide this. I realize not everybody's necessarily read the policy, but part of this is that when you say the committee, Mr. Fallon, I just want to be clear, the committee being the advisory committee, you know, we have to give the advisory committee a certain set of authority to request reports from you and whomever else, buildings and grounds, and not have us be in the middle. We can't be in the middle of every time the advisory committee says, well, what's our heating bill? It can't come to school committee and get on the agenda because this will be a 10-year project. So I agree with you completely. When you said the committee, it's the advisory committee, not us. I mean, that should be making these requests and getting what they need. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
I actually had a question for Member Vanderkloot.
Yes.
Because she has extensive knowledge when new schools came into play. I happened to be teaching at the old Hobbs at the time, and the transition happened. So she actually has some knowledge based of when we transferred into our newer schools at the time. So Ms. Vanderkloot, what I was wondering is, well, I was a new teacher at that time. The process though had committees, if I'm correct on that?
Absolutely. So we had the Building the Future Committee, and I would say that it came somewhat similar in that there was a great deal of discussion in the community about the shape, and then several school committee members, including myself, spearheaded bringing it to the floor for discussion and moving it forward. One of the things which helped us was we had dynamic leadership of the committee. Rick Orlando and Tricia McDonough really did such an incredibly fabulous job outlining the path. The first discussions were, there was a series of events around the community, listening events, getting people's input. What were they thinking? What were they seeing? What was their reactions and their concerns as we moved forward? And remember, at that point, there was no, in a similar way, we had not preconceived that we were going to build 4 new schools. We didn't know. All of that came into being over the course of the process of the committee, looking at the various different resources, concerns, land parcels availability, but even would they be K-8s, would they be, none of that was preconceived. That was all part of the work of the committee. And that was then defined. One of the things that was extremely important was that there were different phases of the committee. So the first was kind of, the outreach. Then the second was taking the information and coming up with some decisions. And those ones then were brought to the school committee for our input, because if we weren't buying it, there was no way we were going to be able to sell it to the community. And then a variety of different meetings happened around Medford, outreaching to different groups and whatnot, explaining what was, what project proposals there were, what ideas there were, and narrowing it down. So it's really quite a process in the same way that I think that we're thinking here. Were there discussions about educational? Yes, absolutely, and they need to be included as well. One of the things, though, that is very interesting, sort of looking back, is that there will be people who say, I just don't understand why. And they really have no understanding today why certain decisions were made back then about either the placement of the schools or why, you know, there's a K-8 and a middle school on one piece of property. So that's one of the interesting things. As time goes on, those pieces are lost to the community. And then we have people saying, I don't understand this. And I can tell you that all of those decisions were thoroughly vetted, and that there was a basis for each one of those decisions. But over time, it does get lost. And that's a valuable thing for me to realize as we go forward with this. I do want to mention, by the way, that, you know, there was at the time, the third stage of building the future committee, which is what we called it. The third stage was the high school. And there was some work, you know, things done over time. And then at some point, Dr. Perella, you may recall, the former headmaster of the high school, he put together he wanted to put together a grant, and he looked very much at the library area and discussed a lot about what should be happening educationally in that area. And I thought it was a very thorough vetting. There was at the time, they put together a presentation. And that's something that, you know, as we're talking about the things we're talking about, not just the physical structure, but how is the building going to be used educationally, we should, even though, of course, I'm sure it needs to be updated, but we should look back to that, what happened at that point too. It was a very dedicated group of people. They had to be able to meet. I think at first we were meeting weekly. We could check with Rick Orlando and Tricia about exactly that, but it was a long process. I would say that it was probably about a year before we came, was the first presentation, and the first narrowing down steps was, you know, it was a significant process of time. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, but no, thank you. I think you hold a valuable experience regarding this based off of the, you know, the newer schools that were built at the time. And like you said, you have an idea of the process and who was involved, and it was mostly community members, as Member Rousseau was saying. I think, if I remember correctly, there were a couple administrators, but they were just overseeing because they had knowledge base that community members probably couldn't grab right at the time.
Right. We certainly had a few staff, but there were also people who acted, they might have attended the meetings because they were giving information.
Right.
You know, so it depended, but I think we really started at ground zero without great, you know, with no preconceptions about what was going to happen. It was a blank slate.
Thank you.
The 6 o'clock subcommittee meeting was canceled. Is that correct? Or are we on a hard hour tonight?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which was the 6 o'clock subcommittee meeting?
Oh, I'm
Matt?
not sure. I just know this said 5 to 6, so I just want to.
Yeah, I don't think there was a 6 o'clock subcommittee meeting. I think we're not on a hard
I think
hour.
6 was tomorrow.
6 is tomorrow. Okay.
Which is
And that
canceled. The
was, yeah,
subcommittee
was
meeting
canceled.
for tomorrow has been canceled. It was 5 to 6:30. Thank you.
Okay. I think we need to probably create a plan for how we're going to get, when and how we're going to advertise, and make sure we have a way to get it out to the entire community, to make sure that we're getting new applications in. So I think sometime after the new year is probably best to do that, and maybe use most of what the last application said, and maybe add a few questions to it. I think maybe we start there, and then I think we're on the right track after we at least get that out and spend plenty of time advertising that, then we come up with a charge.
Sorry.
Member Russo did start that, but I think that's something we need to have a whole another meeting on, to create a formal charge that we will give the vision committee once it is fully established. And then I think at that point, I think the vision committee is going to probably need subcommittees, and one of those will be outreach and strategy communication to be able to grab, whether that's a survey or what, we need to make sure we're reaching out to the whole community to give ideas and suggestions. So it's just wanted to figure out a way how to start the process. And I think probably by the end of January, we should maybe have this application out and come up with a plan on how to get it out. And Member Russo, then Member Graham, then Member McLaughlin.
Thank you. I just want to be quick. That is certainly a way to do it, and I don't think it's a terrible way, but I would say that by providing what that statement is first, I know if I was looking to volunteer, I want to know, what am I volunteering for? And I think if I was being told I was volunteering to participate in a vision, figuring out what our high school would look like, and all I cared about as a community member was how to make sure we actually even have a planet a century from now. And if you told me that the vision included that we will only consider options, and again, I put that on there, that we only are considering carbon neutral or better options, that would excite me as somebody who was like, all right, I can participate in this because I know that's what I'm going to be doing. If you ask me to be involved and you don't tell me what it is exactly, well, I mean, there's just a lot of other things, especially for volunteers to participate in. And I think that if we, for instance, ended up with a statement that says it needs to be carbon neutral, and we don't end up with anybody who is, has a education in that background or does that for a living, then it's going to be just endless, like finding consultants and my opinion is this and Google searches, when we could really make that much quicker if there's an environmental engineer or whatever the proper titles are. So, I mean, my preference is definitely to put that forward first so that those people who are volunteering can say, oh, I do care about that. That's just my preference. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Graham, then Member McLaughlin.
Sorry about that. It's been a long day of Zooming. So I was also thinking about some of the things that I heard in the original, in the last process, where I heard people say things like, I wasn't sure what the time commitment was, so I didn't sign up. And then I also heard people who were selected who were like, I still don't know what I signed up for, and like, I may or may not be able to do this. So I think it is important for us to like come up with that, that sort of charge, as well as some sort of rough sketch of how we think the committee needs to be comprised, and where is the balance of like the person who really wants to be involved but cannot come to a meeting every single week, maybe there's a role for them, versus the person who has a background in environmental science building schools and like what we would want from them. So I do think even if it means our application doesn't go out until the end of February, honestly, I think it's worth our investment to like take the time to sort of spec that out, this group, and really be on the same page about what we're asking the group to do, how we envision that the group will operate, because I think, I think it needs to be bigger than it was, but as soon as you get bigger than it was, you have to have some substructures in place. And maybe that, maybe we can have some of that discussion to sort of provide that guidance, and then send out the application so that there really is like a place for everybody to feel like there's a home for them to participate without having to blindly say, yes, I have an unlimited number of hours to give to Medford Public Schools. So I think I'd rather us take the time in January, and even if it goes into February, to get that part right and like sort of like staked out in some fashion, so that when we send the application out, we can both be clear about what we're asking the larger committee to do, and also maybe there are sub jobs that we're trying to find people to fill, but also that we can have a clear message at that time about that we are committed to having more voices than just the people on the committee, and this is how we will do it. And there, I think we found in the reopening task force, there were a good number of people uniquely interested in the communications piece of what needed to happen, and it was a great group. So, maybe there's a way for us to make sure that we are being clear about all the like various things that we think we need before that application goes out the door. And I think honestly, like, we're probably not going to be in a position to be like lots of on-site activity in large groups between now and then anyway. So I think we just maybe use the time to do that right up front.
Thank you. Member McLaughlin, then Member Vandekloot.
Thank you. I would agree that we need to be very specific in the charge around what it is we're asking the community to be part of, and to be, really take the time to spell that out, which I don't think anyone's proposing that happen tonight, but I do think that, again, that's something we should do with what the hourly requirement is, and maybe some of the specific roles that we're hoping to fill, and, some of those other things that we can work around. I also think that we really need to be thinking, obviously, I'm sure you are thinking of this, Mayor, is translation for, all of this material, applications, and anything else. But I also think that we need to, as we consider the BIPOC community, I really think that as we're even structuring what we want the MHS Vision, and VOC Technical High School Vision Committee to look like, that we need to be able to engage some stakeholders in our community that represent the BIPOC community, to say, are we really thinking about everybody, even in this statement and even in how we're rolling this out, so that, perhaps as we're structuring this statement, we could be thinking about who are some leaders in a variety of different constituencies, so that, again, much like what's been happening in, subcommittee meetings, we are going to some, experts in those areas to ask. So I would also just suggest that as we're even creating the mission for the Vision Committee and the structure for the statements before the applications go out, that we have some identified community stakeholders that really can help fulfill the role of the BIPOC community that we're not representing here, please.
Thank you. Member Vandekloot? Just have to unmute.
One of the things I just wanted to mention was the importance of also having members go out, and even if just in the initial process, we did visitations to other school districts, and that was so important. And that's really harder to do right now because of COVID. But, most of us are framed, we know our high school, maybe we've been in another one, but we certainly, haven't been in a lot. And we went to quite a few other districts, and that was very instrumental. And that required that people were also available to take some time during the day. And that was important because it excited us incredibly to come out of our world, and also to see what was being offered in other districts. And so I just want to mention that maybe it can be conveyed somewhat by people visiting and then doing presentations. They can be, that might be a job, if you would, that some people go, a smaller amount go and then make a presentation. But that's just another aspect we want to make sure we're doing, is visitations.
Thank you. Divya? Let me just try to unmute you. That work?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add one more thing that I think was mentioned by a few folks here, which is, who are the people who are most impacted by the social and physical spaces in the high school, and most impacted negatively. And to my mind, it would be students who have disabilities, students who identify as transgender in terms of their access to bathrooms, for example. So factoring in their input would need to be intentional. And also, volunteering to these places is also a privilege. and recognizing that and doing targeted and intentional outreach, because equity is not giving equal opportunity. It's not about doing lotteries, or else we will end up with another committee which is all white, like what happened the last time. So I just want to front and center that the people who are most impacted, and that would include students as well, I would hope, to be part of the vision committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Member McLaughlin.
Thank you, Divya, for that. Yeah, and so I just want to clarify around, for folks that are watching as well, when Dr. Anand, when you're saying that it's a privilege, I'm hearing that you're saying that it's a privilege that people who maybe aren't working or have flexible work hours or time, or someone to take care of their children, that they're able to participate. Is that what you're saying when you say a privilege? Oh, you're still muted, Dr. Anand, sorry.
Yes, and if I'm that too, and if I'm a parent who is, of a child with a disability living in Medford housing, for example, and I'm working 3 jobs, my voice is very important to have, but at the same time, I do not have the time to devote and sit into a vision committee where, on the one hand, I might be a minority. And so I have the labor of educating everyone else in the room, plus, have the luxury of time to devote to that space. So being mindful of these, would be really helpful if we actually want to, move into action in terms of equity.
Thank you. So I think we really have some work to do as a school committee around what that would look like. And I'd love to talk with you more about that if we could at some point.
Yep, sure, Melanie.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we want to do the charge first. I think that's the majority of this school committee. I don't know if we want to see more of that slideshow, if we want that email to us, and we set up a meeting for early January to try to come up with a charge together. Thoughts? Member Rousseau, then Member Graham.
Thank you. Yes, I think, unfortunately, open meeting law is an example of where open meeting law is truly a bit of a pain. Ideally, we'd all have a Google Doc open and we'd do a bunch of editing and we'd all come up with something we liked as a first draft, and we come to the meeting and we could talk about it, and that would be against the law, so we can't do that. How to accomplish drafting language as a committee, it's awful. I think that that is part of why I had drafted something, because I couldn't envision how to do this. But I think that if the superintendent reaches out to individual members, so the sort of the weird exception here is the superintendent's not an elected official, she can reach out to all of us and try to understand what each of us wants, and in a vision, in a charge statement, and try to come up with something she thinks will work for all of us, as long as she's not like, well, Paul said this and Mia said that, that wouldn't work. But and I personally feel like she could definitely do this work if she's okay with it or wants to assign it to someone. And that would be my preference, because honestly, if we just try to do it in a meeting like this on Zoom, I just feel like we're going to have 7 more meetings.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. I know myself and my staff worked on a charge for the fire station task force. So that's an example. Plus, Paul, you did start something that we can go off of. And if we just all send our ideas to Dr. Edward Vincent and the team, maybe we can try to draft some sort of charge. And I know that some of the slideshow may acknowledge some of what we want in the charge anyway, and we can sit and review it in January. Member Graham, sorry.
I was actually going to suggest that we not put that on the superintendent. She has lots of things to do. We've talked extensively about like how many things we're asking the superintendent to do. And I think this is an example of something that as a committee, we could say, there's like, I don't know, there's 3 or 4 pieces of this, and could individual committee members take a shot at it and bring something to the next meeting. I think that's a really fair way to do it. As long as the committee agrees with that approach, I don't see why we can't each individual, take a part and write something down so there's something to look at. I think it would be luxurious for Maurice to have the time to have a half-hour conversation with each of us about our wants and our needs, but she has like really pressing things to do as well. So I would be happy to take on a piece of the work. But I want to make sure that the entire committee is on board with like who's going to do what, and that it's just simply a draft and a starting point so we can have a productive conversation. So that's just another idea.
I just assumed that Dr. Edward Vincent would kind of delegate that. I know Mr. Fallon, Mr. DeLeva have done a lot to prepare for tonight, Dr. Cushing. So it's up to the committee, Dr. Edward Vincent, it's up to your feelings as well.
Just listening to what was said, I was also thinking about the possibility of sending some of the charge language to the subcommittee, Building and Grounds subcommittee. And I was thinking maybe we could carve out a chunk of time at a pre-existing meeting, if that's a possibility. Off the top of my head right now, I can't remember everyone who's on that committee. And I don't mind the coordination in working with the principals, working with Susie to at least begin to move the work forward. And the second slide deck was kind of trying to capture our ideas of how it could possibly look, which is a draft. So I can definitely send that to everyone. And if we were able to bring it to subcommittee, I don't have the calendar in front of me right now. If a team member might be able to look at the date. So when we have like our next Building and Grounds subcommittee, if that was one way, or it could go to one of the other subcommittees so that we could divvy up the work so that not any one member was, burdened with carrying a heavier load than others. So some of it could be under communications subcommittee. We could bring a portion of that under communications. A portion could also be under Building and Grounds subcommittee. Divide up the work, and through subcommittee, you would have at least 3 members working together. So you would have like 3 voices contributing to, one chunk of it. And then I could work on the coordination piece of, the different meetings and, bringing it together to say this, this is a potential draft and present it at a regular meeting. That's just another way to give people an opportunity to work in a team without violating open meeting law, or work collaboratively as opposed to doing the giant Google Doc.
Member Rousseau?
I feel like we have a lot of options. I guess, for me, it's like the strategy group, it seems really relevant. The equity group, the equity subcommittee that I have seems relevant. The buildings and I feel like they all end up having a piece of it. And I think a really good charge statement can't be 4 pages long. When we ask for applicants, 1 page is good. And that's going to include everything you're going to fill in. So, anything more than a paragraph is probably too much. And I don't have any evidence that that's the right amount, but so I just feel that if we send it off to the various subcommittees, they're either going to all add their spin. The strategy group is going to think all about strategy. Buildings and Grounds are going to think all about the physical plant. The equity, the subcommittee that I have will add several sentences about the importance of equity and understanding how we get different people in the community involved. And then this charge statement will be so long that people won't even apply because they won't have time to finish reading what it is we're going to ask them to do. So I feel strongly like I feel strongly it needs to be as short as possible and as, I don't want to say vague, that's not really the right word, but not as non-prescriptive as possible. Sending it to subcommittee means the subcommittee will have to meet. And just like the full committee, not even two of those members of the subcommittee can open a Google Doc and work together. They have to, maybe the chair does it before the meeting, and then they can talk about it in the meeting, because the open meeting law does apply. I hate that, but I did ask Howard about that last year, because I was very confused how we could work as a subcommittee with open meeting law. So I just feel like it'll just make it so that the subcommittee will meet, then they will have to send it to the full committee, and then we will all have something to say, and then it will go either back to the subcommittee, to a different subcommittee. I just think we'll be in March before we even come close to a statement. So that's just my opinion on sending it off to a subcommittee.
So,
Mr.
I'm
DeLeva?
sorry.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. I think we're all just zoomed out here for a little bit. So what I'm hearing from Member Russo, which no different than what we're doing at the high school, is I think it's more of you coming up with a mission for this particular group. What is the mission statement for this group? Then they can come together and do like the vision stuff, right? Am I understanding that?
If I might, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, the policy statement, our policy says that the assignment the school committee wishes the committee to fulfill and the extent and limitations of its responsibility. So yeah, I mean, that's why I think that it's probably not actually as hard as we're thinking it will be, because we will probably have to debate things like, Paul's all about this, whatever the options are have to be carbon neutral, and if everybody else, if not a majority of us agree, then that comes out. Things like keep it under $150 million, like those aren't going to be in the vision statement probably, because that's really just so prescriptive.
Mr. Delivery, all set? Dr. Edward Vincent, then Member Vandekloot?
Yes, so what I was going to say in regards to having it go and have the respective groups, I truly am, Member Rousseau, where you have a draft charge already written, I am willing to be the keeper of the knowledge and send it to everyone and take feedback and revisions. I'm willing to do that so that I will be able to, work on it, share it with the team, and see if all of those pieces can kind of come together into one inclusive charge statement. And keep in mind that the charge should not be longer than 1 page.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely willing to do that. I'm willing to do, that piece of the work. And then, once we are able to come up with an official charge, the next phase of the work would be to, include that charge, on the application process, but also to include what the specific subgroupings could be, so that as people try to determine whether they're interested in terms of the time commitment in those pieces. So I am willing to do phase 1 of, keeping that charge and trying to at least get the charge done and be able to present it back to you as a committee. And hopefully, by, the end of January, everyone will have been able to have weighed in, so that we'll be able to move on to the next phase at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Member Vandekloot?
I want to ask Member Rousseau to read what he had read at the beginning, his charge. Paul, can you just repeat it?
Sure. And I'll paste it into the chat. Is chat open? It is. The Medford, let me just paste it in first so I can find the text. The Medford High School Vision Advisory Committee shall work to understand and state clearly the possible options to provide Medford with a high school that can suit our educational and other needs for the next 50 years. The options may only include those that will be carbon neutral or better. The advisory committee shall provide quarterly reports to the school committee with a presentation at the conclusion of the service. And it's worth noting that there are 6 sections that we have to fill in. One of them is, the first one is like, how long are we asking them? And my suggestion was we just say a year with a possibility of an extension of 6 months. And then section C asks for the resources that we shall provide to the advisory committee. And in my suggestion, I said the superintendent shall provide reports as requested by a majority vote of the advisory committee, unless the superintendent believes the report request is burdensome. Should a report request be considered burdensome, the advisory committee may request that the request be placed on the next school committee agenda for discussion and consideration. All other resource requests shall be considered on a case-by-case basis and made to the school committee at the next scheduled meeting. So in that, I was envisioning, if the advisory committee, once fully constituted, recognizes that, let's pretend they need to have a site survey done by a company that'll cost $20,000, and that without that, they don't feel they can move forward. I'm just making that up. They would obviously have to come to us and say, we need this, can you pay for it? And then there was a section E, which was about, section E is one of the most weird sentences. I won't read the whole thing because it's quite long, but I essentially think what it's trying to say is, it's around conflicts of interest, and making sure that we don't just have a vision committee consisting of all of the staff of the buildings and grounds department, or that wouldn't be a conflict of interest. But the last one is section F, which is responsibility for release of information to the press. And my suggestion was the chair of the advisory committee shall be responsible for press contact, just so that, with any kind of a committee, everybody will not agree all the time. And to keep things nice, it would make sense if one person is the press contact. But so that's what I had.
Thank you, Paul. Personally, I think that's a fine starting point to be able to, to take what Paul has written, and for us then to deliberate on it, to give feedback to the superintendent, and for us to, then if she could develop some way to share that with us, and then I think that it would make sense. And while I can understand Jenny's concern about not Maurice having too much, I think it's absolutely critical that Maurice does play a strong role in this development. So I think that works. I like Paul's starting point personally. I think it's a good place to begin with. It's solid, but yet there's also a lot of potentials for discussion as well.
Okay, so is there a motion on the floor that will use Paul's starter draft as a way to, take a few weeks and review and send potential additions, edits to superintendent and our staff, to then compile a charge that we will review by the end of January? Well, we don't even have to put a time frame. I know.
So moved.
20 other committee of the whole meetings, but sometime after the new year.
So moved.
Moved by member Vandekloot, seconded by
Second.
member Rousseau. Roll call.
Jenny Graham,
Yes.
Kathy Kretz,
Yes.
Melanie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mia Mastone,
Yes.
Paul Rousseau,
Yes.
Paulette Vanderkloot, yes. Mayor Longo-Kern.
Yes, 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The paper passes. And then also if the administration could just send us all the second slideshow, so we can use that as to help, that'll be great.
And
can put
thank
that
you
out
for
to you right
that,
after
the
this meeting.
administration.
Yes, thank you for the 2 slide decks. That was helpful. I know we
And
received the first one. We'll get the second one, and we can maybe even put them on the website. Member McLaughlin?
And I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Edward Vincent, for being the keeper of the information and reintegrating it and reorganizing it. We appreciate that, especially with everything that we know is going on. So thank you. And I make a motion to adjourn.
Yes, and our next
Second.
committee regular meeting, full of holiday cheer, will be Monday, the 21st.
So everyone's wearing their Christmas pajamas. Is that what I heard, Mayor?
Ugly sweater contest.
All right, you're on.
I must object. I can't.
Come on. Okay,
I'll meet you there, Mayor.
okay, let's do it.
All right,
to
I'm
adjourn
gonna
by-
take Scott's sweater. He's got a good one. It lights up.
Motion to adjourn by Member McLaughlin, seconded by
Member Rousseau.
Okay.
Member Rousseau. Roll call.
Jenny Graham,
Yes.
Kathy Kretz,
Yes.
Melanie McLaughlin,
Yes.
Neema Stone,
Yes.
Paul Rousseau,
Yes.
Paulette Vanderklut, yes, Mayor Longo